Well, that was a dumb thing to say. Hey, welcome to The Whole Truth, where I am taking you through the entire Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, and we are not skipping anything. So if that sounds good to you, reach down, hit the little subscribe button below. Don't forget, if you want to support the channel, you can do that at thewholetruthbiblestudy.com, or just heading over straight to Patreon and looking up The Whole Truth Bible Study there on Patreon, and you can become a supporter, monthly supporter of as little as $5 a month. You get all the study notes that go along with these videos like today in 1 Samuel chapter 14, and then find verse 24. We'll finish up the rest of the chapter today. I split it up because it was such a long chapter. And what we've seen thus far is that Jonathan, the son of Saul, so he's the prince, if you will, this prince in Israel, he attacked the Philistines. The Philistines gathered up in this great number, surrounded Israel, made everybody run in fear. Saul has he hasn't lost the kingdom physically yet. He's still the king, but his lineage will not carry the kingdom. It'll be given to another, because the Lord was seeking someone who was after his own heart. And he'll find that in the person of David. But Saul was not that man, and Saul still was surrounded by all of these people, these Philistines that were going to attack them. His son went out and attacked again, but won against 20 people. That was just in the last video, and spurred this new excitement and obedience from the rest of the Israelite people, the rest of the Hebrew people. And now they all went out to go and finish the fight that had started with Jonathan. Now we're going to see them go out to go finish the fight. They chased off the Philistines, and they'd shifted the battle to Bethaven, and that's where we ended in the last chapter. Well, let's look at what happens now, as we're basically dealing with the people who are in battle. They're going through this huge fight, and Saul had made a dumb vow that the people couldn't eat. And so they were trying to fulfill the vow and not eat, but then they're also trying to be in this battle, and they need to be nourished. I think that gives you an indication of where we're going. Let's start out with the first, let's see, we're going to do verses 24 to 30. So find verse 24 with me, and we'll read down through verse 30. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 14, and then in verse 24. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Now all of the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when the people had come into the woods, there was honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with an oath. Therefore he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. And then one of the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats food this day.' And the people were faint. But Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. Look now, my countenance is brightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines?'" Okay, so let's just understand the context and what's happening. Jonathan had snuck off, if you will. Him and his armor bearer went, and this was in the last chapter. Go watch that last video. Jonathan and his armor bearer went and stood in front of the Philistines, purposefully made themselves visible with this measure of discernment. They said, if they tell us they'll come down to us, we run off. God doesn't want to fight for us. But if we go and stand in front of them, and they call us up closer to them, then we know God's going to fight for us. God's going to fight this battle. And remember what that was like. God can save with a few, or with many, or with a few. And so Jonathan went into that battle and won that battle, and that's what spurred on the people jumping in, the rest of the Israelite people jumping in. Apparently, when all the rest of the people had jumped in, Saul apparently made an oath. So this is while Jonathan had fought the battle, and he was still out fighting that garrison of people, or the news of that was spreading before Jonathan had gotten back. Saul is gathering up the people. They're going to charge against the Philistines, and Saul apparently sometime in the last chapter of what we read in the last chapter, he apparently had made an oath. And he said, we're all going to go into this battle, but nobody eats any food today until I take vengeance on my enemies. Now you're beginning to see where the problem comes in. It seems like a holy, like a spiritual thing. Oh, we're all going to fast this day. But they were not fasting, or they were not foregoing eating to dedicate themselves to the Lord. They were not giving something up to dedicate themselves to the Lord. They were giving something up until Saul could take vengeance on his enemies, which this makes a really good point. It points out the heart of Saul, which God already knew. If you're looking in chapter 13 and you're saying, I mean, we're in 14 right now, but if you're looking in chapter 13 and you're going, hey, wait a minute, why does the kingdom have to get taken from Saul? Because Saul was not a man after God's own heart. Are you ready for this? He was a man after his own heart. He was filled with pride. And that's the problem. That's what was happening with Saul. His pride was getting in the way. So he made this foolish vow that nobody's allowed to eat anything until Saul takes vengeance on his enemies. And if they did, then he's going to kill them. So this is his kind of, not only are we taking this rash vow, but let's point out the fact that it's forced. I mean, he didn't really give everybody a choice here. It's not like he said, okay, I want, who's willing to take this oath with me? That's not what happened. No, in the opposite, he said, if you don't fulfill what I've said, then I'm going to kill you. I mean, it's kind of I hate to use the word to some degree, but it's kind of a terrorism, nobody's allowed to touch any food until I take vengeance on my enemies. If Saul had wanted to do that, it should have been just Saul. Should have been like Saul should have said, I'm not going to eat anything until I take vengeance on my enemies. And so here is Saul making everyone else take this vow with him. And so what do we see is the result of that? Well, the people are famished. It says the people are distressed. They're hungry. They're literally hungry. And they've won this great battle already, driven off the Philistines. They make their way into the woods, and here when they get in the woods, even more, there is honey everywhere. But the men, I mean, you can almost see them like salivating as they're seeing all of this honey, but they can't eat any of the honey. Why? Because Saul made them all take a vow that they weren't allowed to eat until he had taken vengeance on his enemies. So they're all trying to be good stewards of that vow, which is an interesting thing with what happens here in a moment. But Jonathan, we got to stick with the story. Jonathan wasn't a part of that. He had been fighting that other battle. So Jonathan is now rejoined with the group. He's fought against all of these Philistines, driven them away. Jonathan doesn't know anything about this vow his dad made while he was gone. So Jonathan sees that honey, reaches out and takes some of that honey and begins to eat some of that honey. And the people go, your father made us all take a vow that anybody who put food to his mouth was going to die. Jonathan calls out what that is. Jonathan's like, my dad acted foolishly. That is ridiculous. You all are eating. We would have had an even greater slaughter. I mean, imagine if he'd have just let you take the spoils of the war. Imagine if he'd have just let you eat. We probably could have fought even harder and done even more. And Jonathan's just, in a natural way, he's just looking at it and going, gosh, we could have done even better if you all had just been able to eat. But instead we're trying to hold to this silly vow that my dad had made. Now, I mean, granted, you could look at this and say, maybe Jonathan shouldn't have said that. Maybe Jonathan spurred on the people to do what's about to happen in the rest of this chapter. I don't really know if Jonathan should have said what he said here or not. I agree with what he said. He's correct in what he said. His dad was wrong to make the vow. Now, should he have voiced that, or should he have just simply apologized? Or, I don't really know what would have been the better thing. I mean, I think in that moment, I can't say that I wouldn't have done the exact same thing and said, my dad didn't do right here. That's not the right thing. That's not the right thing to do. I think it does prove something, though, that even if we're doing something with good intentions, or what seems good or seems religious, I think we have to still be careful to not do harm in the thing that we're saying, or how we're saying it. And I can speak for myself here as a pastor. I lead a church. And so I have to recognize the fact that I lead that church. So there's certain things that if I call for them or insist on them, there are certain things that people will follow. Well, then we have to ask ourselves the question, is that the thing that they need to be following? Is that the thing that they need to be doing? There's a part of what we do that we have to take concern for our brother. We have to take concern for the person who's beside us. And you might say, well, then how? I mean, it's rightfully so. How do I guard what I say? How do I how do I keep myself from making an emotionally driven decision? It's a great question. How can I keep myself from making an emotionally charged decision and make the right decision? How can I be confident in those? Are you ready for this? I'll give you 2. Number 1, it's what we're doing here on The Whole Truth, God's Word. One of the things that keeps me from making hasty vows and saying, we're not doing this until that, or we're going to fast until this happens, or some crazy thing like that. You want to know some of the things that keep me from that? The scriptures. I read of Jephthah, who said, I'm going to sacrifice the first thing that walks through the door, and it was his daughter that walked through the door. I look at Saul, who said, cursed is the man who puts his hand to his mouth and eats any food before I take vengeance on my enemies. And then look, it was his son who put his hand out and ate the food. I mean, it's an unattainable thing to actually follow through with that. Well, it's ridiculous. And yet I'll tell you, I have seen firsthand, I've seen as people in ministry have tried to make similar remarks. If that happened, we're going to do duh. And it's like a big stance, but sometimes it can be rash. And the point here would be, let's safeguard what we say by checking what we say against God's word. Checking what we say, checking in with what we say, checking in on what God has already said. There's something to be said about, why are we always looking for a new word if we're not willing to listen to the word that he's already given us? Why would you be willing to listen to new revelation if you're not willing to listen to the revelation of God that he's already given? And so there would be one. The second one I would give you would be this, is prayer. If you want to safeguard what you say, take a moment and pray. My good friend Kirk, he's at pastor at church with me, and him and I talk often. One of the things that we often say is practice the pause. Just pause. Sometimes that pause is short if you're in person. Sometimes that's just a few moments to think through what you say. I heard a guy on maybe it was a game show or something. I heard it was like a silly thing. I don't know if it was like Family Feud or something. And some guy was saying that he'd been married for all of these years, or maybe it was a comedian. I don't remember now that I can't remember where I heard it now, but it was almost recently. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago that I heard somebody say he'd been married for like 50 something years. And they said, what's the secret? Like, how do you stay married, for all those years? How do you stay married all that time? And he said, it's not really a secret. He said, you just got to say the third thing that comes to your mind. And everybody's like, what? And he's like, the third, don't say the first thing that comes to your mind. If you say the first thing comes to your mind, your marriage is probably going to come to an end. If you say the second thing that comes to your mind, you're probably sleeping on the couch. But if you'll say the third thing, so the first thing, absolutely never. Go to the second, push it away, and then go to the third thing that you were going to say. That's the key. I don't know if that's exactly the truth that you can say, go to the third thing you were going to say, but I do think the idea of practicing the pause, just push pause for a second, say a prayer, ask the Lord for wisdom. He promises that he'll give wisdom. I don't want to say an easy way, because it's actually not easy, but it's a simplified way to guard your words and guard what you say and help safeguard those people that are around you so that you're not causing harm. And that's what we just see here from Saul. He ended up causing harm. His rash vow, now he's got all these hungry people, and he's got a son who, according to his own vow, his son now deserves the death penalty. He's cursed because he reached out and he ate this honey that was dripping. Well, the story doesn't end there, though. There's more to the story. Pick up with me now in verses 31 through 35. And now they had driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and so the people were very faint. And the people rushed on the spoil and took sheep, oxen, and calves, slaughtered them on the ground, and people ate them with the blood. And then they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. So he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me this day. And then Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, bring me here every man's ox, every man's sheep. Slaughter them here and eat. Do not sin against the Lord by eating the blood. And so every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered with him that night and slaughtered it there. And then Saul built an altar to the Lord, and this was the first altar that he built to the Lord. And so here we see it again. The people were so famished. So first time Jonathan ends up eating, not knowing the silly vow that his dad had made. But the people, they continued to fight, and the battle pushed on, and they took the battle from Michmash to Ajalon. And then when they got there and they had won the battle, the people were so famished, they were like, maybe they were like, Jonathan said his dad had acted foolishly. I don't know, whatever they had said. But it says they rushed. Like they were so hungry, they were starving, they didn't even care. You can just see the scene. They're slaughtering the animals and cutting off flesh and just eating it right there, just eating it with the blood. That's a sin according to the Bible, to eat with the blood, to eat the meat with the blood still in it. They're supposed to slaughter the animal, let the blood drain out, and cook the meat. They're not supposed to eat it with the blood still in it. So whether by draining it first and then, dehydrating it or boiling it or frying it or roasting it, whatever it was they were supposed to do, however they wanted to cook it, they were not supposed to eat it with the blood. So the people have now sinned. They were so famished. Think about this. Saul's legalism, if you will, caused the people to actually sin. Now, I think that that's a lesson for us, because I think that actually happens more than we might realize, that legalism causes us to focus on the wrong thing. Listen to that again. Legalism causes us to focus on the wrong thing. And all of a sudden, you've got somebody so focused on the wrong. They're so focused that doing the right is actually doesn't really amount to anything, but they're so focused on keeping that they're not even focused on the actual right thing that they're supposed to do. That might feel confusing the way that I'm saying that, and it's probably going to be really hard to apply it to yourself because you probably feel like you're doing the right thing. But let's look at Saul as the example. They're so busy trying to make sure that they follow Saul's legalism, Saul's vow. They're so busy trying to do that they actually end up sinning against God and breaking a law that God had actually given. I saw a pastor the other day. Somebody sent me a video of a pastor who's up in front of his church. And he's, a big guy in a suit. You can tell it's probably some independent Baptist church. And, I love independent Baptist churches, but they're legalistic at times. And this is what happened. This pastor is walking around and he's like, oh, I'm about to say it. And he's like, pat his head. He's like, somebody stop me or I'm just going to go on with it. And you can hear all the guys in back there, go on with it. And okay, so he goes on with it. And what does he have to say? He's like, all you young boys running around here looking like you went to the beauty salon rather than to the barber shop. You need to get yourselves a boy's haircut. You need to get it high and tight. And he goes on for several minutes railing on these young men who were sitting in the church that night, by the way. They were at church that night. And he's railing on them because their hair was too long by his opinion. He said that they needed to have a haircut that was high and tight, and they needed to go to the barbershop, not the beauty salon. You know what I think when I hear messages like that? You know what I think when I hear people do that? And I hear it in all kinds of different ways, but I think, what a wasted opportunity. You know what he was supposed to share with them that day? The hope that's found in Jesus Christ. I can't find one place in the message that Jesus gave us that boys with hair, you might say, well, Paul said that long hair, men with long hair is a public shame. Yeah, okay. Yes, Paul was also speaking about the way Paul was saying that in that context of like a woman with a shorn head or a man with long hair. He was saying that as like a cultural statement that everybody would understand. Like that's what he was trying to say. He wasn't trying to make the implication that if men had long hair that they've done something morally wrong because they have long hair. He was just trying to say like everybody knows. Paul was just trying to say like everybody knows that guys with long hair, women with short hair, it's a shame. Like that's all he was trying to say. But in case that's confusing to you, let me say it this way. The strongest man that ever lived was Samson. He had taken the Nazirite vow. And do you remember what that vow was? He couldn't cut his hair. He couldn't eat any he couldn't touch anything dead, couldn't eat anything that was a grape or drink any wine, and he couldn't cut his hair. There's another person in the Bible that is under the Nazirite vow. Do you know who it is? It's John the Baptist. And then not only is John the Baptist the guy who baptized Jesus, he's the other guy that lived under the Nazirite vow. Do you know who took the Nazirite vow? Do you know who took a vow and followed it? Because you know how you ended a Nazirite vow, right? To end the vow, you'd shave your head. So how did you go about that vow? Well, you wouldn't let your hair get long, or you would let your hair get long. You wouldn't cut your hair for the time of the vow. Did you see his tail go by again? Look at him, y'all. Look what he's doing. Come here, you. Come here. You want to come here? You want to say hi? You better come over here. Come on. Come on. Come say hi. Come on. Come on. Come on. You started it. Come on. Finish it. Come on. Show everybody. Tell everybody hi. Come on. Come here. Come on. You're taking too long. Come here. Come on. Come here, you. Come here, you. There he is. He's so scared. Look at him. He's so scared. Look at him. Say hi to everybody. Hi, everybody. Okay, now go. Get out of my videos. Go on. Okay. Sometimes, y'all, it's what happens when your studio's in your house. That's just the way it goes. All right, where was I? My point is, Paul himself had taken the Nazirite vow, which means he let his hair grow out. So here's this pastor standing up, railing on these boys for their hair, and he missed an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And Jesus told Peter, he said, do you love me? And Peter said, you know I do. And he said, feed my sheep. And I beat them up because their hair was too long. Do you see the point that I'm trying to get at? You can actually, your legalism can actually cause sin, where all of a sudden you're focused on the wrong thing, and you're so focused on the wrong thing that you end up doing the wrong thing. Does that make sense the way that I'm trying to say that? I hope it does. I hope I've made sense of that. Let's look on in the rest of the text. Now, pick up with me in verses 36 through 46. Now Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. And the priest said, let us draw near to God here. And so Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. And Saul said, come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But not a man among all the people answered him. And then he said to all Israel, you will be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do as what seems good to you. Therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. And so Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between my son Jonathan and me. And so Jonathan was taken. And Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. Jonathan told him and said, I tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and so now I must die. Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. But the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. And so the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. And then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. This story just went deeper and deeper and deeper, all because of this guy's vow. So here's what happens. Saul had, all the people were eating meat with the blood in it. Okay, Saul, to fix that, says, no, everybody stop, builds an altar and says, everybody bring your meat, take whatever you've killed, bring it up here. Let's slaughter it and prepare it properly and have you eat it properly. My goodness, what are you all doing? Saul did right there. Saul did the right thing. He makes a correction and says, bring it here. Let's at least cook it. If you've killed it, let's go ahead and eat it and let's get but don't eat it with the blood. Don't sin. So everybody had done that. And now Saul's like, all right, let's go back out to the battle and finish up what we've done. But before we do, I'm going to seek the Lord, and I want to see what the Lord has to say about this. And so he goes to seek the Lord, but the Lord won't answer him. Now, you might ask how that's happening, and this will help explain what just happened in the rest of what we read. So you have to understand that they had lots. The lots were called the Urim and the Thummim, and it literally means like light or illumination and perfection. Okay, so check this out. there's kind of seems like there's like two things, the Urim and the Thummim. The priest would keep those two things, and they were the lots. Some people believe, I don't know if this is exactly how it went, but some people believe that they were like a yes and a no rod, and they would ask a question and they would reach in and they would grab it, and what it came out, then that's what it would be. And so it seems as if Saul was saying to the Lord, will you go with us this day? But the Lord kept giving him a no lot. Like he kept giving him a no. He's not going to answer him that day. He's not going to speak with him that day. Saul now has a realization, or at least an assumption. He says somebody must have sinned, and that's why God doesn't want to talk with us today and doesn't want to give us an answer. So Saul still doesn't know what happened with Jonathan. So Saul says, we're going to cast lots and figure out whose sin this is. And whoever it is, even if it's my son Jonathan, he's going to be put to death. Here he goes again with these vows. And so the people are like, all right, do what seems good to you. So he puts all the people on one side and Jonathan and himself on the other side. And he draws the lot. He says, we're going to cast a perfect lot. We're going to cast the one that means perfection. And he casts the lot for the people who gets the whatever and who gets perfection. It was him and Jonathan. They got the perfect lot. Now all the people they're out of it. Now it's between him and Jonathan. You can hear almost the tremble in Saul's voice. Okay, Lord, who's done this sin between me and Jonathan? And the perfect lot fell on Jonathan. Do you get that now? Jonathan is now pinpointed, and he confesses. He says, Jonathan, tell me what you've done. And Jonathan confesses and says, I ate a little bit of the honey. Do you see what he's done? Saul has now led Jonathan to believe that the Lord is not going to speak to them that day because he ate honey out of a vow he didn't even know his dad made. Are you seeing that? Call me crazy. Maybe, just maybe, the thing would go like this. Maybe just simple deductive reasoning would say all the people had just eaten meat with blood in it. Maybe they shouldn't have done that. Maybe you shouldn't have made this vow to begin with. But Saul's so stuck on it, he's like, well, let the Lord do so to you and even more, because the lot has fallen on you. Saul is ready to kill his own son for eating a little bit of honey after he's had this great deliverance and he didn't even know his dad had made the vow. Do you see the problem? And so the people jump in now and they're like, no, should Jonathan die after this great deliverance that he had? Should Jonathan die? We've seen the Lord working through him. Should Jonathan die? And so the people stood up between and said, no, not a hair should fall from his head. Nothing should harm him today. He's done a great thing before the Lord. And so thankfully, Saul ends up relenting and doesn't kill his own son and lets his son go so that his son would not die for something that honestly he didn't really even do. There is a connection there to Christ, though, that I think we should point out before we wrap up this chapter today, and that's this, that Jesus, the Son of God, did die for something he did not do. Let that sink in for a moment. Christ knew no sin. Jesus is the perfect, spotless Lamb of God who knew no sin. He did not sin. There was no sin in him. In him is light and no darkness at all good, all holy, all righteousness, all the time. And yet Jesus went to the cross and he did die for you. He died in your place so that you could have reconciliation with God. Let's finish up the rest of this chapter now. It picks up in verse 47. And so Saul established his sovereignty over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, and against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them and gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. And the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Jeshui, and Malchishua. And the names of his two daughters were these. The names of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, and the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. And now there was a fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. I feel like the Lord has a little humor in putting the word Saul, the name Saul, Saul, beside Saul, SAW, because they sure sound the same coming out of my mouth. Saul and Saul. Okay, well, anyways, sorry, y'all. I got a country accent. It just comes out. What did somebody point out the other day? Something about oil and something else. Oil. It's the way it's said. Oil. I don't say it right. Anyways, okay, the point that I'm trying to get at here as we close out is that Saul established his sovereignty. He was the one ruling in Israel, and he continues to attack the Philistines. We end this chapter seeing Saul is on fire to do the right thing. Like, he continues to do the right thing. Wherever he found these Philistines or Amalekites or whatever, from this point on, he fights against them. Now, consider for a moment, at first, he wasn't doing that. He was like waiting and he was kind of hesitant. Remember, he was hiding before, but now we see him doing the thing that he needs to do as a king. He's leading the people into battle because these people they've been plundering them. They have been oppressing them. The Philistines, the Amalekites, these other nations have been oppressing Israel, and it's time for that to stop. And so Saul is the king. And Jonathan and his actions led Saul, his dad, to do the right thing. So here's what I would point out to you. God's purposes in having Israel have a king have not been thwarted. God had said to Israel long ago with Moses that one day they would have a king, and when they had a king, this is how it would go. It's not that God doesn't want them to have a king in Israel. It's that God did not want them to trust their king more than they trusted him. God wanted them to have a king who would lead the people to God, but they've not been doing that. Even still, we have not seen, in all of the judges, we have not seen the people leading, the kings leading the people to God, or I shouldn't say the kings, but the judges leading people to God. Now they have a king, and the king, for all intents and purposes, we see that he is puffed up with pride and selfishness. And he's leading the people into that. Even in this last part of the story, what did you see? Because he's always fighting with the Philistines, whenever there's a valiant man, whenever there's a strong man, Saul takes him for his army. Can you imagine? Here you are in Israel, and because you're strong, because you're fit, instead of being able to do something else that's good for Israel, you keep being brought into Saul's army to make the army stronger so that Saul can continue in those battles. And so there's like a contrast here. There's a contrast between what we saw out of Jonathan the son and what we're seeing out of Saul the king. Saul the king is, though he's accomplishing the will that God wants, which is driving the Philistines back and driving the Amalekites and the foreign nations back, what we're seeing his kingdom erode, and that erosion is happening because of pride and because of selfishness. Now let that sink in for our lives. How many things in our lives are eroded because of selfishness, are eroded and corroded because of pride? Think about what I'm saying for a moment. How many things have we messed up? We would look at it and go, man, we messed that up for ourselves. Why does that often happen? Like, often we mess things up for ourselves because we were being selfish about it. We thought that we were going to make it better for ourselves. I remember the story. I can't remember the brands, but I think it's Memorex. I can't remember if it was Memorex or Sony, RCA, one of them. I'm going to use Memorex. If I got the names of the companies mixed up, you can forgive me and just understand the point of the story. But, back in the day, they were like way back in the day, y'all. I'm going way back. They were going to make videos on what we called a tape, a VHS tape. Well, did you know there was actually something before the VHS tape? Did you know there was actually something different? I don't remember what the name of it was. I think RCA was the one who came up with it. And they had this other system that they were going to utilize, and they patented it as a sole, like they were the sole people who could make it. Nobody else could make this thing. So they were the sole run on these little cassettes that you could put a movie on, and then you could put those into their type of player, and their player would play the special one. Well, I believe it was Memorex. At the same time, Memorex had come out with the VHS tape. And that's the ones we all know. They're like the big boxes, and they've got like two wheels in them, and the tape like runs through. If you've ever seen, you'll know what I'm talking about if you're older like me, we used to have tapes, and we put tapes in the VCR because VHS tapes is what we would use. Well, Memorex made that, I think it was Memorex or some company made that public, that other companies could make tapes, VHS tapes. So the one company had their type and they did not make it open. And the VHS tape was the one that was open for anybody to use. And you probably know the rest of that history. I don't even know the name. I can't even remember the name of the other type of cassettes that had movies on them. And why is that? Because that one got closed off. But the VHS tapes are the ones that we all know. Because why? Because Memorex, RCA, Sony, Philips, go down the line, all of these companies could make them, and then the movie companies could buy those cassettes, those VHS cassettes, and put movies on them. And do you see what I'm trying to say? It was like selfishness was the ruin. Like the one you would think like, oh, like I can't give away the farm. I mean, we're the ones that made the thing. That's true. But the fact of the matter was, instead of fighting this company against us, instead they made it that company against everyone else. And so their VHS tape survived. How often does selfishness and pride ruin the thing that we were trying to protect from getting ruined in the first place? And so I would encourage you today, here's the best thing that we could all do. Take what we have, lay it at the feet of Jesus, recognize that this is all temporary and this is all going to go away, and that the best thing that we could do with our lives is submit it to the Lord and follow him in whatever he would want us to do, laying down our own will and our own pride to him. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow as we get into 1 Samuel chapter 15. We're finally there.